Welcome. Today we're going to remember comparative and superlative adjectives. So, when we talk about comparative adjectives, it's important to remember that we use this to show the difference between two objects. For example, if I'm going to compare these two volcanoes, one is higher than the other. So we have the adjective high and the comparative higher. When I want to show the difference between two objects, I use the comparative adjective. Now, let's take a look on how they are formed. What letters do we use to make them happen? So, to make a comparative adjective, we get an adjective plus the letters ER plus the word then. For example, small becomes smaller. Strange becomes stranger. And sharp becomes sharper. What about the words, the adjective words that finish in Y? So we're going to change letter Y for letter I. For example, noisy becomes noisier with an IER at the end. Lucky becomes luckier. And funny becomes funnier. Some words end in a consonant and have a short vowel sound. Remember what we talked about the CVC, consonant, vowel, consonant. So before we put ER, we are going to double the last letter. For example, mad becomes mather with a double D. Hot becomes hotter with a double T. And big becomes bigger with a double G. It's also important to remember that when the adjective is long, so it has 2, 3, 4 or more syllables. Teacher, I don't know how to count syllables in English. Eu não aprendi a contar sílabas em inglês. That's not a problem. If you don't know how to count syllables in English, you can use the number of letters. Você pode contar as letras. You can use the number of letters. So if a word has 8 or more letters, then it has, of course, a lot of syllables. So when we have these long adjectives, we're not going to add ER. We're going to use the word more to form a comparative. So we use more plus adjective plus than. So we have more fabulous than, more beautiful than, and more talented than. The superlative adjectives, different from the comparative, show the difference between 3 or more objects and indicate which one stands out, which one is super. So to make a superlative adjective, we always have more than 3 objects to be compared. So Antarctica is the coldest continent. Asia is the largest continent. My father is the tallest of the family. The superlative adjectives are always formed with the plus adjective plus est. And remember, the is very important in a superlative adjective. So let's form. Late becomes the latest. Sweet becomes the sweetest. And short becomes the shortest. So when we were talking about comparatives, we were using ER. Now we're talking about superlatives and we're using EST. So that change that we make in Y also happens in the superlatives. take off the Y and change it into an I. And sometimes the consonants are also dubbed. So all those changes that we made in the comparative, they are also valid for the superlative. When the adjective is long, remember 2, 3, 4 or more syllables, generally 8 or more letters. We use the most plus adjective, again with the. See how the is important? The most horrible, the most insupportable, the most wonderful. But we have some exceptions to these rules. The adjective good doesn't make the comparative gooder. That doesn't exist, okay? So these guys are exceptions. They are irregular. Good becomes better, and the superlative is the best. So remember, for one word, good. To compare two objects, better. To compare 3 or more objects, the best. There are also some other adjectives that do this. For example, bad. The comparative is worse, and the superlative is the worst. Little has two comparative forms with less and lesser. And then the superlative, the least. Then we have the adjective far, the comparative farther, and the superlative, the farthest. Teacher, should I be worried about the irregulars? Not really. Devo me preocupar muito com os irregulares? Não muito. The irregular ones are very often there for you. You don't have to make it. It's a good idea to remember good and bad because we use that a lot. É uma boa ideia se lembrar dos irregulares good e bad. Mas os outros não tem tanto problema. That's it, guys. So we've just seen comparative and superlatives again. Remember, we did some activities on this on pages 80 and 81 of your English book. Bye now.